Discord me. Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 17 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half. You can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've seen him on the Tough Cover Pod. It's Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at @MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how you doing tonight?
Doing good there. It's the sports equinox right now. We got all the sports going on, football, basketball, baseball, hockey, but we are here to talk about football. I had a great NFL Sunday without the Birds playing. It's always great when you get rid of that, especially when they lose. So you can kind of get over that loss, and then on Sunday you can kind of just enjoy the NFL. So we'll talk about the Eagles, and then we'll get to the part of the show I'm actually excited to talk about, which is the rest of the NFL. The Eagles I'll kind of trudge through.
Yeah, and we missed that late week show. We promised you guys the week 5 review, week 6 preview. I had some family stuff come up, was gone over most of the weekend. So I tweeted out my picks, and maybe you guys followed along. But I am currently getting over a cold, and my voice is going. So we're going to see how this goes. But hopefully we have a great show lined up for you guys. Maybe it'll be really great because I won't talk as much. But we're going to review every week 6 NFL game. So before we get to that, though, this is going out live on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, Twitter. Drop us a comment. Let us know what you want to talk about. We love to interact with you guys. The archive also goes out on Apple Podcasts. So please follow, rate, and review. Mark, let's dive into the Birds here. They have the Thursday night game against the reigning Super Bowl champ, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The final score is closer than the game really felt. Tampa wins 28-22. Nick Sirianni flips the bird to Vegas with his 2-point conversion to cover the spread. What'd you take away from this game?
Yeah, I think Nick had +6.5, but I think my takeaway is more so less about the team and more about the fan base. And I know, Shane, you stick to the Eagles part of the Philadelphia fan base. I have to deal with all the teams. I am at like an all-time low right now with my opinion of the Philadelphia fan base, and the Eagles fans are probably number one on that list right now. And I'm obviously wearing the hat, like I'm one of you guys, but we can't act like every loss is an absolute disaster and a tragedy, and we can't act like a loss to the Buccaneers is a loss to the Detroit Lions. Like, you look at the teams that we've lost to and that we've stayed competitive with in a lot of respects, besides the Dallas game. These teams are really good. The Bucs and the Chiefs are 2 of the top 3 teams in terms of Super Bowl odds right now. Dallas is in the top 6 in Super Bowl odds. They look like a wagon. I mean, the other loss that they have was San Francisco, which we covered pretty well. They outplayed San Francisco in that game, especially in the first half to 3 quarters of that game. They outplayed San Francisco. Obviously, they lost, and that's how football works, so it's not going to be remembered as any sort of good game. But these are not embarrassing losses. Like, what I'm hearing from, writers, I'm sure we'll get to one specific writer that suggested something at some point, judging off of your Twitter. But and then all the, the radio hosts and the people. I do a podcast, Everything's Fine. He goes down and he talks to the people walking out of the stadium, and they're talking about how terrible the team is and how horrible everything is. And I'm sure we'll break down some complaints, and we have plenty of complaints. But they lost by 6 to the Buccaneers. Like, it's not like some embarrassing, atrocious performance. And I get the first half did look ugly. Let's lose to a team that isn't really good and isn't currently favored to go to the playoffs before we jump off a bridge. I just think we're so reactionary to losses. We're so reactionary to wins too. The highs are not usually as high as you think they are, and the lows are also usually not as low as you think they are. And I'm kind of losing my mind with like the reactionary nature of this fan base. That's not like a Bucs take. I know I went a little macro there, but I don't know if you have any take on that.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to the beginning of this season, and You certainly didn't hear on this podcast anybody saying the Eagles were going to be a great football team. Now, you did hear us talk about how they could compete for a division. They're not competing for said division. What changed? Well, the Eagles aren't worse than we thought they would be. Dallas is just really good, and we didn't see that coming. And so the fact that the Eagles are rapidly falling out of this division race doesn't say anything about them being worse than expected. They're about what we did expect. It's just that Dallas is playing way better than we expected, and we'll talk about that. But for me, this season, it starts and ends with Jalen Hurts. It's about deciding what Jalen Hurts is. You're playing a Bucs secondary that's massively injured. Richard Sherman goes down early. You think this could be a game that Hurts could go off, and it just doesn't happen. I mean, honestly, Hurts was brutal in this game. The whole game, it was bad. And I've seen a lot of talk about, is it Hurts? Is it Sirianni? And the answer is yes, it's both. But it is a much greater degree of Jalen Hurts causing the issues right now, in my opinion.
I would push back on that a little bit. I do think that this offense is not currently tailored to Jalen Hurts, and I think we see that when I know that he was not very good in that game. I'm not going to say he was at all good in that game, but he was better in that game in the later stages when we did kind of take the shackles off of him. We stopped running quite as many RPOs. I do think he's always seemingly better when we get down from behind. I know that's a usual NFL trope. And he's also seemingly better in the second half of games when we kind of seem to adjust our play calling and move away from what we start the game doing, which seems to never be successful if you judge the starts of our games so far. I think it's 50-50. If anything, I'm leaning Sirianni, but the RPOs are kind of just frustrating to me at this point. Clearly, Jalen Hurts, I don't think he's very good at running RPOs. Like, I don't think he's very, adept at reading what he should do and making the decision correctly, whether that be on whether to give the ball to the running back or whether that be to throw the ball or where to throw the ball, or whether that be for him to pull it and run it or not. I don't think he's been very good at decision-making in those three aspects, especially on the RPO. So let's take the shackles off. Let's kind of just run an offense he's more familiar with, go back to his Oklahoma days a little bit, go back to some of the things that we let him do in the second half when you spread it out wide. And obviously, I always say this, and it sounds like such a simple-minded football thing. But when you send four verts, when you send four guys deep, or one guy in the slot goes intermediate, and you send some guys deep, what it's going to do is it tracks the defense away from where Jalen Hurts could be running if he needs to, if one of his first reads are not there. And that's something we need to be thinking about. I know when you think about Jalen Hurts running, everyone always talks about designed runs. Like, let's get him the ball in a zone read. Let's run a read option. Let's get him running the ball that way. I always look at it in terms of, I want to see him running when a play breaks down. I want to see on third down when we don't have something. That's when I want to see Jalen Hurts escape and run around the corner and get out of bounds for 10 yards on 3rd and 7. That's what I'm looking for out of Jalen Hurts more than anything in terms of the running game aspect, less so than designed runs. I don't really need to. I don't think he's Lamar Jackson in terms of let's run a designed run where we're going to run him like a running back right up the hole. Like, he's not that. He's not a 4-3 quarterback. He's not obviously a 4-3 is exaggerating for Lamar, but actually, I can't remember what Lamar ran.
That's what they said he ran. I don't buy it, but
it was in the
what they said.
Yeah, I knew it was like some 4-3, 4-4. I knew it was around there, but Jalen Hurts was like 4 in the 4.5s and the 4.6s, I believe. So
4.5s, I think.
Yeah, he's not Kyler Murray even. So this is not a guy that I just want to run in a designed run fashion. This is a guy that has the wheels to create havoc when things break down. And that's what I want to see him be allowed to do a little bit more of. And, him scrolling out to the right every single time is not really the way that's going to, that's not with at least the offense we're currently running, where we seem to have 4 guys in the intermediate all kind of with the defender can immediately latch off of that when Jalen Hurts starts running. So that's one thing I've noticed. And it seems like every second half, the running lanes open up for Hurts a little bit more when we open up the playbook and send guys a little bit deeper.
Yeah. Sirianni had a quote where he was talking about the RPO usage, and he said it's easier to read one guy post snap than to read the whole defense pre snap. And I think that tells you a lot about his faith in Jalen Hurts to process the field and make good decisions. And, microcosm here, but we have that. I think it was in the third quarter. We had the play where we motioned Jalen Reagor from the top of the screen to the bottom, and he runs the wheel route with a deep curl route from the other receiver on that side. It's against cover 3. You can find this on Twitter. I can post it later, but that wheel route is open, and it's open 20 yards before Jalen Hurts tries to throw it and underthrows it, and Jalen Reagor ends up drawing a PI. I think it was third quarter. I'd have to look again. That's a 2-man route combination. You're literally just watching that deep corner on that side and seeing which guy he takes, and it was clearly obvious, and Hurts missed it. And it's not like he was trying to read the whole field. And so I've got major questions about Hurts's ability to execute whatever offense Sirianni puts out there. And we can talk about you should run the ball more. But at the end of the day, if Jalen Hurts can't make those reads, it doesn't matter how much we run it. That might get you in more competitive games this year, but it doesn't make him the answer. And I feel like I hear a lot of people saying we're not giving him a chance because we're not running the ball. And a quarterback has to be able to make those throws. Nothing else matters if he can't do that.
Yeah, to me, you know where I'm at on this. I don't really care whether or not we run the ball unless we start running the ball really efficiently and then stop. I mean, if we had Derrick Henry back there and we weren't running the ball, I'd have a little bit of a different outlook on this. But yeah, I'm absolutely with you there on the complaints about run-pass ratio are mostly tired to me. My complaints are more so what I was talking about with just I do think the RP and I hear what you're saying, and I hear what Sirianni's saying, and I do think that it's telling, like you said, and I think that that's important to note that I don't think Sirianni trusts Hurts very much to read the defense. So that is a big problem. If you can't trust him to read one guy, how do you trust him to read the whole defense? And I hear that, but I just think, and I'm not saying that he's been excellent. I'm not saying he's been Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, any of these guys of the mold that you want to hopefully mold him after. I mean, this is the guy that Howie didn't want to miss on Russell Wilson. So he took Jalen Hurts. So, I'm not saying he's been close to any of those guys, or even though I do think you could compare their first years with some of, his first however many games at this point. But you see him completely struggle with the RPO and completely struggle in the first half. And then in the second half, it is, whether we want to say how good it is, we can talk about the varying levels of success he has had game to game. I do think it's been very evident that he's more successful in the second half of games when it does seem like we're running a little bit of a different style of offense. So I'm not saying we're not giving him a chance. I'm not going that far. I'm just saying maybe we're not using him to the best of his strengths. And that's not going crazy about. I'm not saying anything crazy. I just, like I said, I would like to see some more deep routes. I get that, he doesn't have a huge deep ball arm. So that does make that a little bit tough, but I think Quez needs to be utilized more. And I've said that repeatedly. I hope Goddard is utilized more. And I think that that's something we will see going forward after the Ertz trade, obviously, and after Sirianni's comments after the Ertz trade about Goddard, where it really seems like now they've painted themselves in the corner on paying Goddard, and they want to see him succeed the rest of this year. So I think that he's going to be a big X factor for this offense going forward.
Yeah, and I mean, there's things that Sirianni can do to help Hurts. You can roll him out more. That cuts the field in half, but Hurts doesn't use the whole field anyways, so it doesn't matter. Get him out in space.
It's a great point.
Your point, attack more vertically. It creates more of that space for him. Use up tempo more. Like, that seems to help him. So there's some things you can do, but ultimately Hurts is going to have to make those plays.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the defensive side of the ball, well, actually one good point I want to put out on the offense is Jordan Mailata, I thought, really settled in and played well at right tackle. And so, it now Lane Johnson's back, obviously, but it presents you with some options where maybe you keep Andre Dillard and you plan for a future that doesn't include Lane down the road. I don't know. It opens up some possibilities, but it was nice to see him settle in at the right tackle position.
So I didn't look at PFF grades or anything like that. I did hear Mailata had a really good PFF grade. I don't know if you had a chance to look at those for this week, but Dillard seemed like he had a bit of a rough game. or at least a rougher game than he has had. I don't know how that.
Yeah, he didn't look as good to me this game.
Yeah, I'm gonna look that up while I'm talking, but that's definitely going to be something. Obviously, Lane Johnson's playing this week, correct? I know he's back.
Yeah, as far as I know, he's playing.
Yeah, so obviously we're not going to have to worry about Andre Dillard, but it did seem like the brief love affair we had with Andre Dillard not being terrible, it was over after last week. So it was a nice 2 or 3 games there where we thought he wasn't a complete bust.
And then on the defensive side of the ball, I want to see something different. It's driving me crazy always seeing our safeties not even on the screen on the TV. Like, I know that we don't want to allow the big play, but you're facing Tom Brady. This guy has made a living just nickel and diming down the field on perfectly executed 15-play drives. And I've heard the quote, I can't remember who said it, but said, when you can't win on defense with personnel, win with chaos. And the Eagles obviously don't have the personnel to win on defense. And so you got to mix things up, bring some of that chaos. Not that you're going to confuse Tom Brady, but you might confuse the guy next week and the week after that. And I'm ready to see us start to mix up some more looks here on defense.
Yeah, I mean, we can't – I get the whole you don't want to give up big plays thing, but you just can't give teams 5 to 10 yards whenever they want it. And you're also not going to be able to give teams Alex Singleton at linebacker. And I've never seen a guy on defense have better instincts and better abilities to be around the ball. And then he has no ability to tackle without being dragged 3 to 5 yards. It is like, what's the point of hitting someone 5 yards past the line of scrimmage when they drag you 5 yards and it's a first down anyway? I mean, what is he even out there for if he can't cover and he can't tackle without being dragged? It's infuriating to watch Alex Singleton play. It's infuriating to watch this defense, the way that they scheme. I mean, Darius Slay did a lot of talking after, week 5 and after the big game he had. And in week 6, they basically put it in a situation where he couldn't get burnt. They put him so far off of the receivers where he almost kind of escaped any criticism, even though they gave up a ton of yards. The defense, I have no other thoughts other than what you said pretty much. I mean, you got to try something different. You got to do something different. You got to blitz. I don't know if that's, bringing your corners up a little bit and playing a little bit more press or a little bit more man. And, I don't quite know what the answer is, but it's not what it is currently.
Yeah, and Alex Singleton's just a total liability in coverage. He just can't do it, which really limits you when you want him to be your number one linebacker. Yeah,
I mean, the linebackers are a joke, and they've been a joke for a long time, but this year feels as evident as any other year that this is one of the worst linebacker cores that we've had, even in a horrible era and decade or probably more of linebacker cores here in Philadelphia. This one can compete up there with any of them.
Yeah. And then after the game, Zach Ertz, it comes out he has been traded to Arizona for cornerback Tay Gallen, who was, I believe, a 6th rounder this year and a 5th round pick next year. So what were your thoughts on that trade?
Yeah, I mean, do you think that there was a 5th rounder available in the offseason? Probably. So realistically, they probably should have made this trade in the offseason and avoided having him throughout the season. Maybe he helped us win a game or two. Who knows? I don't really think he did, but whatever. There's no real difference between them trading him now or when we wanted them to trade him around the draft, I guess. So whatever. I think he'll probably be good for Arizona. I have him in some fantasy leagues on my bench, so I'm excited to maybe have a starting tight end who was formerly not really able to be played in fantasy. But in terms of Eagles, I had the jerseys wrong side. The jerseys behind me. He's my favorite Eagles pass catcher of all time. I mean, I heard a lot of complaints about Ertz this year and last year, and I always just kind of try to remind myself that people aren't going to remember these last 2 years when they think about Zach Ertz in 10 years as an Eagle and as an Eagles legend. They're going to remember him scoring the touchdown in the Super Bowl. They're going to remember the decade of production, or a little less than a decade actually, but Just a ton of production with the Eagles and the good years with Zach Ertz. He was a great Eagle, one of the best of this era for sure.
Yeah, it's in line with what I thought we would get. I loved the line where I think it was Schefter tweeted out that this is a guy the Eagles really loved in the draft, and you know how he funneled that to him. But it's like you didn't love him that much because he didn't go till the 6th round and you didn't take him. But, I'm glad to see him get to go play for a competitor, a contender. I do wish he had that 11 more receptions to be the number 1 pass catcher in Eagles history. I wouldn't count out that he will return to Philadelphia to get that record, though.
That'd be awesome. That would be awesome for sure. He's the man. One of my favorite players from the Super Bowl team. There's a comment here from Marky Mark. Gannon said today that when they called aggressive defense, they had good results and will call more aggressive defense. Hopefully that's the case. It just seems like he's overmatched to me when he's calling defense out there. It seems like they're not very disciplined. It's just, he could say whatever he wants right now. We'll see what he calls on Sunday. I will say the Raiders, while we'll get into that matchup more so later on in the week, and there are things to be concerned about. Derek Carr's a really good player. Darren Waller's a really, really good player. And Henry Ruggs starting to kind of prove some people right from the draft last year. Wasn't one of my favorite players, but I liked him a little bit more than he showed in his rookie year. So the Raiders do have some things you have to worry about and some things you have to scheme for, but they're not the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're not the Kansas City Chiefs. They're not the Dallas Cowboys. It's more like kind of scheming for that Panthers game with a better quarterback. I would kind of compare it. Actually, it's probably not even that comparable. Maybe the Falcons game because you have a really good tight end, but it's probably not comparable to anyone we've really played so far this year. Derek Carr is a really good player. It's going to be a tough game, but it's not going to be as tough of a game as, the 3 or 4 best teams in football. And that's what we have been playing. I don't know what the exact stat is, but the strength of schedule that the Eagles have played so far and that they have remaining is absolutely outrageous. So I did want to do okay. So they've played the 3rd toughest schedule so far, and they have the easiest schedule in the NFL from here on out. So I don't know where we were really planning to go here. This is out of nowhere thing, but I did want to pull up the schedule and just kind of go through it a little bit and see where we think they are right now. I'm struggling over here. There we go. Maybe not. There we go. So sorry, folks. It took a little technical difficulties there. So we are sitting after that that first 6 weeks, obviously, and I'll speak for Shane a little bit here. I don't think either of us expected to be any better than 2-4. After this first 6 weeks, you opened up this schedule. When you looked at it, San Fran looked like a Super Bowl contender in the preseason. We always knew Dallas was going to be a tough game. Kansas City obviously has Patrick Mahomes. Carolina, we probably didn't think would be a tough game. And then Tampa Bay, obviously Super Bowl champions. So we came into the year knowing that first 6 weeks were going to be tough. And we came in knowing that we probably weren't going to get 3 wins. So now is really when this schedule opens up a little bit. And I'm not saying, like you said at the beginning, the Eagles are exactly where we thought they were going to be. But the division is a lot better than we thought it was going to be by proxy of Dallas being that good. Obviously, Washington and New York have underwhelmed. But this schedule gives you a little bit of hope that maybe they can sneak into a 7th seed in the NFC. Now, if people out there want to say, now what does that do for anybody? What is that gain for us? And maybe you're right. But I would like to see Nick Sirianni calling plays in important games, trying to win. And I would like to see how Jalen Hurts would react and look in important games. But I just wanted to go through here. Do you think we beat the Raiders next week?
I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of that one yet. I'd put it at a 50-50.
Agreed. So I think we can let's count that as a half win because I think we'll have another 50-50. So I think we'll beat the Lions. I'm sure you'll agree with that. Yeah, you're not a not a big lot. Jared Goff or Dan Campbell guy. And then I think we lose to the Chargers.
Agreed.
I think we beat the Broncos.
Yeah, I've got something to say about them later, but I agree.
Yeah, bad game for Teddy. And then New Orleans, I think that's a 50-50 game personally. I think that Raiders and that Saints game are 50-50 games, especially because the Saints are so Jekyll and Hyde. Like, I don't know what that team is yet. Maybe by week 11, we'll know a little bit more what that team is. So I think it's fair to say they could go 3-2 in that stretch right there. Is that crazy?
No, I don't think so. I think you have that at 4-2 though.
So
it was just a loss to the Chargers, right?
So I'm saying they'll lose one of these games to the Raiders and Saints, and they'll win one of them.
Oh, I was already counting the Giants game as a win. Carry on.
We'll move right.
That was an honest mistake, but it plays out well for humor too.
It did. That's very funny. Yeah, they're going to beat the Giants, and if they don't, I'll be very upset. I would be very upset with a loss to the Giants. So that would take us to 4-2, which would take us to 6-6 by Thanksgiving, which is just funny. One of my other people, everything's fine. He said it'll be a 500 Thanksgiving, which right now sounds fantastic. The Jets in week 13. The Jets are not very good. They should win that game. You go 7-6 maybe, and then you get the divisional kind of round robin at the end of the year here with Washington, New York, Washington, Dallas. If you go 2-2 there, that's a 9-8 season.
Yeah, and I think that's easily doable. Like, we always knew this schedule was front loaded with difficulty.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because I was still looking at, let's say that we give them a win against the Raiders, and let's say we count that Saints game as a loss. That means that they would have lost the first 5 home games of their schedule, which is kind of funny. It seems like, and this was one thing I did note before the season when the schedule came out. It did seem like our road schedule was so much easier than our home schedule. Which is kind of just brutal. You look at San Fran, Kansas City, Tampa Bay, the Chargers, the Saints, and then the 3 divisional teams. Pretty tough home situation. And then obviously we get the extra road game too this year. So hopefully we get that. I had a question about that. Do you know if that alternates season by season? Do you know if the teams that get 8 road games and 9 home games the next year it flips?
Yeah, I think it's like one conference gets 9. So like the AFC got it this year and the NFC does next year.
I wasn't sure. I was thinking about that today. I wasn't sure how that worked. That's interesting. And yeah, I would assume they split those games with Washington at the end of the year, and I would assume you hopefully beat the Giants, and then Dallas. It'll probably just depend on if Dallas is clinched, if they're playing for a 1 seed or whatever's going on with Dallas, if they even care about that game. So maybe we shouldn't be counting wins against the Lions and the Giants and the Jets and the Broncos. I don't think those teams are, any better than the Eagles. I really don't. So yeah, I just think this was just something I wanted to do just to kind of, again, just calm down, people. Yeah, I'm not saying this is a Super Bowl team. When I say to calm down, I'm not saying, calm down, we're going to go and prove everyone wrong. I'm just saying, realize what expectations were. Realize, they've been pretty good against the spread this year. So not that anyone cares what their against the spread record is, but obviously that is commensurate with where expectations are on a week-by-week basis. And they were supposed to lose to Tampa Bay by 6.5 around. They lost by 6. It was not some embarrassing loss, and I get that it looked bad for a long stretch. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a bit of an optimist, and I didn't even think I'd be an optimist this season because I thought they'd win 8-9 games. But the panic to me is just crazy. Let's see what happens in these next 2 games. I think these are 2 really, really important games for Sirianni in general and for the Eagles organization at this point.
Yeah, I agree. And like we said earlier, the Cowboys are just better than we thought they were. That was an embarrassing loss. In the context of what we know now, it's not as bad as it once looked either. I want to see what we do down the stretch here. It's not time to panic. It's not time to freak out. It's just time to settle in and see what we can learn about some of these players and some of these play callers.
Yeah, when I'm saying don't panic, I'm not even telling you the Eagles aren't bad. I'm not telling you Nick Sirianni isn't bad. I'm not telling you Jalen Hurts isn't bad. I'm not saying any of those things. I'm saying we don't know yet.
You're saying the Eagles aren't going to have 3 top 10 draft picks, unfortunately.
Well, it doesn't look like that. But Miami, man, that Miami pick, and we'll talk about it later. Oh, that might be the saving grace of this whole season. We might get the first pick from Miami. No, I don't think it'll go that badly. I do think they have a bit of an easy schedule as it kind of rolls down the schedule here, and the Colts do as well. So both those teams will have opportunities to improve throughout the year. But no matter what, we are going to go into next year loaded draft capital wise. And I no matter what happens this year, I'm not going to be jumping off a cliff.
Yeah, Marky Mark says the Eagles' rest of the season will go as Hurts goes. And
Absolutely.
That's really what it's all about. So let's go around. Oh, go ahead.
Before we go around the NFL, just because I saw you commented on Twitter, if you want to bring up that tweet while I'm talking in regards to the Marcus Hayes article.
Oh yeah.
I'm not a big fan of Marcus Hayes, but he's an opinions guy for the Inquirer. He wrote an article saying that Jalen Hurts should be benched, and while I think that's pretty crazy, the second part of it's even crazier. Put in Joe Flacco. If you wanted to do this, maybe you could talk me into Minshew. I'm not saying that that's a smart take, or it's just not saying that they should play Joe Flacco, because saying they should play Joe Flacco is just like, oh, I remember him 5-7 years ago. He was good then. That's just insane to me. It's so stupid. But I'll read Shane's tweet to help him out give his voice to rest. He said the season is a waste if the Eagles don't find out what Hurts is. That is the goal of this whole season. Anyone who thinks otherwise lied to themselves about what this team was. Side note, bench him for who? Are you counting on Joe Flacco or Gardner Minshew to elevate this team? Yeah, and that's absolutely true. And Gardner Minshew, while we have both sung his praises on this podcast to a certain degree, in terms of saying we thought that trade was very smart, trading a 6th-round pick for what we think is a very good backup, or at least a very serviceable backup. And you look at Seattle with Geno Smith. Geno Smith didn't embarrass himself. He wasn't terrible, but they would rather have Gardner Minshew, I think. I would rather have Gardner Minshew at least. So I do think that you can make an argument, if you're really, really low on Hurts, and if you're really, really high on Minshew, then you can make an argument maybe that I'll listen to based on some of his statistics from Jacksonville that Minshew could help this team out in the short term. Joe Flacco, just stop writing. Just stop talking. Just stop doing anything in relation to football.
Absolutely. Well, let's throw it around the NFL where Mark's going to talk a lot and I'm going to nod because my voice is not going to make it. But our first game is the London game where 2 teams from Florida flew across an ocean to play each other because that makes sense. Jacksonville gets its first win of the year thanks to a kicker who was a free agent in week 1. Now, Miami is down 2 corners and their top 3 receivers, but you just cannot lose this game. It's embarrassing.
Oh, it's absolutely embarrassing. And, they go for it on 4th and 1 there with a minute or 2 left. I believe a minute left. They don't get it in a similar way to the Bills not getting it on Monday Night Football, and that lost them the game. As soon as that happened, you knew Jacksonville was going to have a chance. I don't know if that means Brian Flores should have punted in that situation. I probably would have punted. I'm a little bit more risk averse in those types of situations. I know the analytics said you probably should have went for it. I know that they weren't too strong on the situation though. It wasn't like the percentage difference in, win expectancy in punting it to going for it wasn't too crazy. So I kind of do think they should have punted it. They go for it. Jacksonville gets the chance with short field position to only need 5 to 10 yards to kick a field goal to win the game. And they start going backwards. It was crazy. Jacksonville keeps moving backwards. It's like, oh my God, they're not even going to get in position to do it. 5 seconds left. They're on, I believe it was the 50, maybe their own 40 or the Miami 45. And Urban Meyer, we've killed him a lot. We've killed him on this show. He made a really, really smart decision. And apparently it was one he made at Ohio State that he remembered from college, which is funny. But he, instead of doing what the two options at that moment seemed to be, were Hail Mary or attempt an unmakeable, 65-yard or whatever it was field goal with a guy who just barely kicked the curveball, 54-yard field goal. That field goal is like unlike anything I've ever seen. 54-yarder, it seemed like it was going to miss by 20 yards, and then it curves back in like a gyro ball from, just unbelievable. And what they did was incredibly smart. It wasn't something I even considered. With 4 seconds on the board, they ran a quick slant, get down, call a timeout. They got like 8-9 yards on it, and they kicked the field goal to win the game. And, I'm not saying Urban Meyer's a good coach because of this, but I do think it's important, since I've killed him so much, to give him credit. I didn't even think of that as like, I love football strategy. I love when to go for it. When to punt, when to kick field goal. I love all that kind of stuff. That hadn't even crossed my brain in terms of being an option to do a little quick slant route and to get a field goal. That was a really good coaching call. And obviously Trevor Lawrence did look a little better in this game. I don't know if that's because Miami, was missing corners, like you said, but hopefully things are moving in the right direction for Jacksonville a little bit.
Yeah. So then the next game, which also impacts Eagles draft capital, is the Houston Texans at the Indianapolis Colts. Indy wins this one easy, 31-3. And importantly, 4 of the Colts' next 5 opponents have losing records. So I think you can expect the Colts to go on a little bit of a run here. Jonathan Taylor had a big game, 145 yards on 14 carries, while Davis Mills had an off day. And at this point, the Texans are just waiting on Tyrod to get healthy again.
Yeah, I heard he's day to day. So maybe hopefully we'll see Tyrod soon. Maybe he'll play this weekend and make them at least a little bit more competitive. And instead of just you see that game on the slate for an NFL Sunday and you're like, oh, I don't have to pay attention to that whatsoever because it's not going to be a close game. The Texans are a joke. Carson Wentz did. The numbers aren't very good. Honestly, they're not all that impressive. I did watch this game, though. It was one of the games on the TVs. And I will say the deep ball for Carson Wentz looked better than I've seen in a long time in that game. So maybe that's something to build on for Indy, something to build on for Wentz. But, yeah, you can't take a lot away from the game against Houston. And like you said, they do have a really easy schedule coming up, which I know some people are going to look at and say, oh, that stinks. They're going to not be a top 10 pick. But they probably were going to have to bench Wentz if they were going to do that and then be a top 10 pick. So now, hopefully, they convince themselves that they're a playoff contender and go like 6-11 or 7-10, and we get, the 12th, 13th pick or something like that.
Yeah. So moving on, we've got the Vikings at the Panthers, one of 3 games that went to overtime this week. Wow. Minnesota blows an 11-point lead. Then they take it to overtime and win. My question for you out of this game, Sam Darnold goes 17 for 41 with a touchdown and a pick. Is it time for us to apologize to Adam Gase for putting all of Sam Darnold, how bad he was, on him? We killed Adam Gase. Is it time that we apologize?
I like that. I like that take. That's good. Yeah, I think it is. I do think that people that were just so sure that Sam Darnold was not the problem, that the Jets were the problem, and he was just going to go elsewhere and everything was going to be fixed, especially after that first 3 games, that he was just a top 10 quarterback. And the problem was always the Jets. No. It's that last 2 weeks, same old Sam Darnold. It was actually unbelievable that they were able to get back in this game. They played like crap for 3.5 quarters of this game. And Minnesota is just the best team I've ever seen at beating the crap out of a teams for 3.5 quarters and then somehow almost losing. And usually they win, but I think they lost one that they should have won earlier this year. They've just been a bizarre team that no matter what happens in the game, water finds its level and they're like going to overtime or like kicking a field goal to avoid overtime. Or it's just been insane game after insane game for the Minnesota Vikings this year. I have no idea really what to make of them. I think I do have an idea of what to make of Carolina at this point, at least without Christian McCaffrey, and it's that they're a bad football team.
We got Eagles champ chiming in saying, fire Howie. He's always good for one of those every show. So moving on to the Chargers at the Ravens. this was a surprising game. The Ravens blow out the Chargers 34-6. It's about what you would expect when the Ravens rushing attack faces one of the worst run Ds in the game for the Chargers. But I did not expect the Ravens passing defense to shut down Justin Herbert. What did you make of this one?
It kind of reminds me of the game that the Chargers had last year where the Patriots, I think, beat them like 45-0 or something like that. And it was like, whoa, what happened there? Like, they just ran the ball right down their throat and somehow completely stifled everything they tried to do on offense. They took care of Eckler out of the backfield. They took care of Allen and Williams out wide. It's really impressive. That's one of those games where it's like, wow, this Baltimore team might be different. I had kind of been looking at the Ravens just like, Lamar Jackson needs to be Superman and be the MVP of the league for them to really compete with all the injuries they've had. And I wasn't quite as sure that this rushing attack was as good as rushing attacks of the last couple of years for the Ravens. But that game kind of reminds you that when you have Lamar Jackson, you're going to have a good rushing attack no matter what. I think the Ravens are a Super Bowl contender at this point. And I thought the Chargers kind of were before this game. So kind of makes you reevaluate what you think of both of these teams. I thought these teams were, even, if not the Chargers being slightly ahead. And the Ravens just beat the doors off of them. They never let them back in this game. They got up big early and, they really stepped on their throat.
Yeah. So the Cincinnati Bengals at Detroit. This is a blowout. Cincinnati wins big. Detroit has now gone 4 games without a first half touchdown, and Jared Goff just continues to look lost. What do you got out of this one?
They haven't taken a snap with the lead in a game this year, and it's just absolutely wild. But you still could look at some of their games, and they're another team losing just a lot of close losses. But yeah, I think Jared Goff stinks. I think Dan Campbell crying on the podium is, it's week 6, man. Get it together. Maybe if it's like week 14 and you're 0-13, I get it. But, you're 0-6. What did you think you were going to be? You took over as the Lions head coach. I know you were talking about biting kneecaps, but you're still the Lions. I guess there's more to say about the Lions than the other side here. But the Bengals are 4-2. I mean, that's pretty surprising. The Bengals, I don't think a lot of people expected this out of them. I don't think people expected them to compete for the playoffs this year, especially in what looked like a loaded division with the Ravens, the Browns, the Steelers, and it still might be a loaded division. So it's an interesting thing to watch going forward. I know that they go to Baltimore this week, so that'll be a real test of how real the Cincinnati team is. And they don't have to win the game, but you can't get embarrassed like the Chargers did.
Yeah. So speaking of getting embarrassed, the Rams embarrass the Giants and just blow them out 38-11. Rams are in a really easy stretch here. They've got the Giants, then they have Detroit and Houston. So the Rams are about to go on a run. Meanwhile, the Giants are 1-5 since crying that they didn't get into the playoffs with a 6-10 record last year. And it's time to clean house in New York. Like, Dave Gettleman built this whole roster, and it's awful. Notably, one of my favorites is when he selected Daniel Jones at 6 overall, he got a lot of flack for it. And he said, his quote was, "Why don't you check in 3 years?" Well, Dave, it's been 3 years, and Daniel Jones is awful. Joe Judge makes baffling decisions. Like, Daniel Jones could be the guy. I doubt it, but maybe. But there is no doubt that the Giants are about to rebuild. And a new general manager, new coach. You might as well do it around an unproven rookie than an unproven quarterback on a second contract. And so it's time to burn the whole thing down and start over in New York.
Burn the whole thing down and throw away the ashes. I mean, I wouldn't keep anything. And I think Daniel Jones is as big of an issue as Gettleman. I think he's as big of an issue as Joe Judge. I think Daniel Jones is a bad quarterback. And I get it. He was concussed. He was out there playing a week after a brutal concussion. Maybe that played into the turnovers. Those turnovers are the same turnovers we've seen out of him since he's been at Duke. He was not worth the pick when he was a 0-star recruit who didn't win games at Duke. And he hasn't proven himself to be worth the pick after 3 years, like you asked us to check in on Gettleman. So yeah, I mean, the Giants are a joke. Joe Judge is a joke. He's punting from the opponent's 40. This team is they've been the worst team in football for 5 years now. If you look at the record over the last 5 years, and that's hilarious because it's their least favorite team in football, and I'll always root against them. And the fact that they cried and whined and bitched and moaned about a 6-10 team missing the playoffs last year will always be the sourest of grapes in the history of sour grapes.
Yeah, absolutely. So Green Bay at Chicago. Aaron Rodgers has some words for Bears fans as he takes down the Bears 24-14. But what I want to talk about in this game is I have a take. And that take is that Justin Fields is the anti-Kirk Cousins. Okay, so Kirk Cousins, you look at box scores, he looks good. The analytics kind of like him, but you just watch him and he's just not good. And yet you put on Justin Fields, you look at his box score and it's bad. 16-27 for a $174 and a touchdown with a pick. His film looks so much better. And like you watch him, and if you could remove him from the dumpster fire that is the Bears and Matt Nagy and Bill Lazor, you feel hopeful. You feel confident. Now, if they don't run him this year, which is a definite possibility, but that's my take. Justin Fields is the anti-Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I like that. I have seen some things I've been concerned on accuracy wise, and I have seen some things I've been concerned on with him going deep. Like I know that there was one play where he thought it was a free play, and he aired it out deep, and it was like 15 yards.
To be fair, it should have been a free play. That guy was offsides, and they didn't flag it. But yeah,
no, it was. You're right. It was weird. But it was like 15 yards over the guy's head that he was throwing. Like, at least give your guy, like, throw it in his like vicinity, I guess, if you think it's
at least he threw it in bounds. Jalen Hurts did the same play and threw it out of bounds.
Well, he threw a pick, so it ended up even worse than it was in bounds. But it was there was just a couple plays in the game where I was like, well, what are you doing? And that's because I had Green Bay -4.5 in that game and money line and some parlays. And Green Bay is so weird, man. Like, I was going into that game being like, yeah, Green Bay is going to prove that they're a Super Bowl contender. And I watched that game, and it's just kind of like they slog around and they don't pull away. They let Chicago hang around the whole game. They were down for a while. I believe that they were losing at halftime. And there's something not right with Green Bay. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's the defense, but the defense held them to 14. So, you know, I don't know. I don't quite know maybe it's Matt LaFleur, maybe it's play calling. I don't know, but something isn't quite right with Green Bay in terms of them being a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah. Well, let's keep going here. We've got 6 games left to get in. We've got Kansas City at Washington. It's close for a long time, but Kansas City puts it away. They have got to stop turning the ball over. And it made me think of one of the GMs said last year that people missed on Mahomes in the draft because they watched him in college with a team that had no defense, and he just made too many mistakes trying to do too much.
McShay.
Was it McShay?
Yeah.
That's what's happening right now. In my opinion, he knows that if he doesn't score, the defense is going to give it up. He's pushing too hard. I don't know what the solution is, but that's what I'm seeing when I watch him play.
Yeah, I would just – and I know you're not freaking out. I don't think –
Oh, yeah, not at all. I think Mahomes is still the best quarterback in the league.
Yeah. I'm merely pushing back on some of the Twitter people I've seen being like, the league's figured out Mahomes. It's like, okay, he's like top 2 in QBR and passer rating and first in touchdowns. And this was a game he ended up throwing, I believe, a hair under 400 yards in. So it still ended up being a good game for him. But I will say the one pick he threw is the worst decision I've seen Patrick Mahomes make in the NFL. That is like a Carson Wentz 2020 level decision. He was going down and he just flutters it up in the air, and it was bizarre decision. But the other turnovers in that game I would just say that they weren't his fault. The one went through Tyreek's hands and the other was a fumble. But there have been, I do think, more chances where he's felt like he has to make a play, like you said. And we saw that on the one play that ended up getting negated. But it was one of the most unbelievable plays I've ever seen, with them escaping 3 would-be tacklers in the backfield and then firing a jump pass across his body 60 yards down the field, the opposite direction to Tyreek Hill. For everyone that ever says, the Mahomes people or the media shoving Mahomes down my throat, or Mahomes isn't as good as the media thinks he is, just watch that play. Just watch some of these plays he makes. He is just something else.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's keep rolling on here. The Raiders at the Broncos. The Raiders pull out the win. And I've just got to say, Teddy Two Gloves is back. We removed that. We put him in elite tier, sarcastically. Teddy Two Gloves is back. He has 3 interceptions, 1 fumble lost. And Denver is a team that was getting by with a quarterback who avoided mistakes and a D who made big plays. And neither one of those is happening anymore. And Denver is rapidly falling out of that division.
They're missing 11 starters, I believe, from their opening day lineup, sprinkled across the offense and defense. So that is a huge impact. So when you're the Broncos, you need every one of your impact players out there. When you don't have a good coach, I mean, personally, in my opinion, he's a defensive coordinator. So they don't have an offensive coordinator worth anything. I believe I saw a stat that under the Pat Shurmur regime in Denver, they have not scored a touchdown on the opening drive. So the last 2 years, and it dates back actually to the 2019 season. Pre-Shurmur was the last time they scored a touchdown on the opening drive for Denver. And I know that's Drew Lock a lot of the time, Teddy for a couple games this year, but that's still absolutely inexcusable. And I think that shows a lot about an offensive coordinator's ability to plan for a game that you can't score on the first drive. But, Denver, once you miss a couple guys, once you're missing a Bradley Chubb, a Patrick Surtain, a couple of these guys that are hurt, you are going to drop off the cliff when you don't have an impact player, a quarterback, when you don't have a offensive game caller at head coach or a good offensive coordinator. They're a mess, and I think they're going to continue to be a mess. And I hope the people that were confident in the Broncos to make the playoffs when they were 3-0 after beating the Jets, Giants, and Jaguars, look themselves in the mirror a little bit. And I just think, again, earlier I was talking about it from an Eagles standpoint, but it's a football or general standpoint in general. People get way too high on things when teams win, way too low on things when teams lose. And I mean, people were way too high on this Broncos team. People were probably way too high on this Raiders team when they were 3-0. And obviously they lose 2 straight. John Gruden's emails, they get Gruden out of there. And then Rich Bisaccia comes in, and it was so obvious that they were going to come out with their heads on fire, playing a revenge game. Not revenge game, but that kind of thing happens in every time that I feel that a coach gets fired or resigns or whatever it may be. And this was a different situation. But I do think that it galvanized the locker room a little bit to see him gone.
Yeah. So let's move on to the Cardinals. They blow out the Browns. I bet this game when Chubb was ruled out, and then all the COVID news broke for Arizona, and it had me wishing I hadn't. And it turned out to be fine. Arizona scored 30 points 5 times out of 6 games this year. Here's their upcoming schedule: Houston, Green Bay, 49ers, Carolina, Seattle. If they get by Green Bay, they could hit their bye at 11-0. Wow. They're on fire. On the flip side, you've got the Browns. Baker hurt his shoulder again. Kareem Hunt got hurt. Chubb was already out. The Browns are just kind of a mess of injuries and ineffective defense at the moment.
Yeah, I feel bad for the Browns because I still do think this is a Super Bowl level roster if healthy. And it has not at all, it hasn't worked out because they haven't stayed healthy. So they're 3-3. They've had a brutal schedule so far. Marky Mark said the Browns lost is like the Packers lost one bad game. Plus they have a ton of injuries. JOK's hurt. Kareem Hunt's hurt. Nick Chubb's hurt. Baker is injured, but playing hopefully on Thursday night against the Broncos. Of course, they have all these injuries, and Baker gets hurt on a situation where they have a short week with Denver coming in on Thursday. So that'll be interesting to see how that game goes. I guess on Thursday we're going to record after that. I still think Cleveland wins that game just because I'm so low on Denver at this point. So it does look like Baker's going to play. It does. Chubb and Hunt are out. I do think the Browns will be able to do just enough to win that game against Denver on Thursday night. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of it depends on Baker. Another team that would probably love to have Gardner Minshew for a 6th-round pick, but, he could probably be helpful to them while Baker's banged up on his shoulder there.
That's true. I agree. And also, by the way, what you mentioned about you bet them when Chubb went out and then you were nervous when the Cliff Kingsbury news and the COVID news. I had the exact same roller coaster. I bet on them the moment I got the Chubb text from Schefter. And then when the Arizona drama, I got real nervous. Left it in there, though, and cashed out easily. Always nice when you get one of those games where they were just up big right away. I had them +4, too. So you knew no matter what, you were kind of safe in that game, which is always fun. So yeah, Arizona's legit. I was kind of pushing back on that until this game. Arizona's legit. They are a legit team in terms of maybe even competing for a Super Bowl. If Dallas is a Super Bowl contender, then Arizona absolutely is, too.
Well, they've got Zach Ertz now, so they're definitely a Super Bowl contender.
That's true.
So Dallas at New England. Dallas wins this game in overtime. This is only the 4th game ever that Bill Belichick has lost after leading at halftime. Wow. He's 109-4 when leading at halftime.
Oh my God.
So crazy stat. The Cowboys now head into the bye. And at this point, we've got to say they're one of the best teams in the NFC, and they're just simply hoping to get healthy. They have so many guys out. Not that that's not true for a lot of teams, but it's a well-timed bye for them. How high do you think the ceiling is for this Dallas team?
Well, their safety, Kazee, tested how high he could get because he got a DWI tonight. I don't know if you saw that, but
I did not, but that's a perfect segue, I guess.
So they already had some injury issues, and now they're going to be missing I don't know. I don't know if he's going to be missing, but I imagine he'll get in trouble. So who knows what happens there? But Dallas is amazing. Dallas is really good. I still just don't think they're going to be able to beat Tampa or LA or maybe even Arizona when it comes, maybe even Green Bay. I still look at them as just like a tier below those teams. Maybe they're on the same tier as Arizona and Green Bay, but I still look at LA and Tampa and think it's going to be really, really tough for anybody to beat either of those teams and go to the Super Bowl besides those two.
I think at this point, Dak is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL.
For sure.
He's playing as a top 2 or 3 quarterback. And as long as the defense can continue to be average to below average, which is all they need to be, I think they're a serious competitor. But, I mean, there's so many good teams. You're right.
Yeah, I think my problem with Dallas is like they're probably the scariest offense, right? They're maybe the best offense in football. To me, they're still probably in the 20s defensively. They're still probably maybe the 20th best team defensively, somewhere in that range. And you look at a team like Tampa, and I think Tampa's probably 3rd or 4th offensively and probably 10th defensively, probably in the lower half of that bottom 10 or that top 10. And then you look at a team like LA, and I think LA has the potential to be top 5 in both. So I just still, even though Dallas is probably the best offense of these teams, I still think their defense is going to hold them back from being a legitimate, full-blown Super Bowl contender comparatively to LA and Tampa Bay. But that honestly has less to do with Dallas, and like you said, more to do with just how good some of these teams are. And I didn't even mention Buffalo.
Yeah. All right, Seattle at Pittsburgh. This game goes into overtime as well. TJ Watt strip sack. I guess it wasn't really I don't know. Was it a sack? The ball gets punched out. I don't know if he was across the line at that point or not. Geno Smith, I thought, played largely mistake-free football, barring that ball getting punched out in overtime. Even then, he's got both hands on the ball. I think Geno did what you need him to do. To me, that defense has got to step up here. Russell Wilson's out. You can't be giving up 23 points to the ghost of Big Ben. Seattle's next 2 games are at home against the Saints and the Jags. They have to win both of those and get Russell Wilson back to have a shot. But even then, it might be too late in the division that they're in.
I lost you there for a second. I just want to say this before I forget. Patriots Cowboys, I honestly think was like the game of the decade. I just want to say that because I think that was one of the craziest like twists and turns. Like they're gonna win, no, they're gonna win, no, they're gonna win. Like I thought that was the most fun game I've like sat and watched in like that didn't really mean anything. Like obviously there's better Super Bowls and stuff like that. That game was just an incredible football game for the NFL to have in their like mainstream slot at 425. But I digress. To the Sunday Night Football game, Seahawks Steelers. I agree the Seahawks defense has to step up in a situation like that. I didn't think Geno Smith was too bad. Obviously, the issue with Geno Smith is that he takes so many sacks, and he takes that bad sack from TJ Watt that obviously wins the game for Pittsburgh pretty much. So, yeah, I'll be interested to see what happens with Seattle again on I think it's another primetime game. I think they play on Monday Night Football this coming week against New Orleans. And like I said with New Orleans earlier, they're a complete Jekyll and Hyde team. So I'm really interested to see if Seattle can beat a New Orleans team that I'm not overly convinced is great in Seattle on Monday Night Football. Are DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Chris Carson's hurt. Are those guys and some of the guys they have on defense able to step up and win that game at home? What did you think of Jamal Adams introducing himself as the best in the nation instead of giving a college on his intro on NBC?
I mean, he's a safety that can't cover anyone. Like, he's not even a good safety. He's a glorified linebacker that can only blitz. So I don't even think he's that good of a player, to be honest.
No, he's not good. He's like just straight up not very good. And I think it had his PFF rank like below his name. It's like 52 out of 68, like or whatever it was. And it's like, I'm the best in the nation. Like it was so stupid. I can't stand Jamal Adams. But yeah, I think we can move on to the Monday Nighter.
That's kind of like DK Metcalf going at Shannon Sharp for calling his play stupid, where he didn't go out of bounds and they end up fumbling it. Like, just you screwed up. Like,
yeah, I hear
just
you.
Whatever. Okay, Monday night, the Titans topple the Bills 34-31. Derrick Henry, I mean, he's a monster, and he opens up everything for the offense when he works. And when that happens, they can play with anybody. But their defense is so depleted. Christian Fulton is on IR. Caleb Farley got hurt. They think it might be an ACL now. Chris Jackson's out. So I don't know what the Titans have on defense anymore. To me, the biggest thing I learned in this game from the Bills is it just once again it exposed their pass rush. The Titans had allowed the second most sacks in the NFL, and the Bills only hit the quarterback twice. That's a huge problem.
Yeah. So I'm actually, that's fair. That's all fair for sure. They have a very young pass rush. So at this point, it's still very inconsistent. You can't.
And they did a lot to address it in the offseason. And maybe it just needs some time. You're right.
Yeah, but to your point, they did a lot to address it, but Russo has been better than anyone could have hoped. And I actually think Basham's been pretty good as well. Ipineza on the other side has been really good. So these are all young guys. They can't expect that to be, just snap into being a really, really good D-line right away with consistency. So they do have to kind of nurture that. And McDermott's got to do a good job getting pressure. If you're a head coach, defensive coordinator at this point, you got to really scheme it up defensively. So this game actually made me less so negative on the Bills and more so positive on the Titans. And this was kind of one of those reminders, like you said, about Henry. When Henry gets going, it's really hard to stop the Titans. And Tannehill really struggled in the first half. I thought he played a really good second half. He made throws when he needed to. At the end of the game, A.J. Brown, who has been really disappointing so far this year, finally seemed to show up in the second half and remind people like, hey, remember me, the guy who people thought was like a top 5 to 10 receiver coming into this year, and he was really good, helped win them the game for sure. So it's going to be interesting to see going forward, but I think this was one of those games where Tennessee reminds teams like, yeah, they were supposed to be a Super Bowl contender a little bit this year. So now they're sitting at 4-2. And it doesn't feel like they're a 4-2 team right now because some of the games you've seen them get blown out against Arizona. They didn't play well for a lot of that game last night against Buffalo, but I'm taking that game as more of a positive for Tennessee than I am for a negative for Buffalo. I do think that was kind of just a letdown spot for Buffalo.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It gives you some questions about Buffalo, but we've seen what they've done all year. I'm not really overly concerned. I still think they're a top AFC team.
Same. Agreed.
Well, that's going to about wrap this up. Mark, do you have any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Just because someone had a comment, and I'm not quite sure what he means by it, but I agree with him if he means what I think he means. This will be my final thought. He said the Dallas game should have been a blowout, and I do think that that's fair. You look at that game, and this might be coming from someone who had Dallas money line really hard on some parlays, but Dallas fumbled on the one. They threw a pick in the end zone, and they missed a field goal. So this was a game. It ended up being so close. Like I said, it was the game of the decade. Went to overtime. Patriots get a 75-yard touchdown that looked like it might win the game for a minute at the end of the fourth quarter. All of that's not possible if the Cowboys just take care of business and don't turn the ball over in the end zone 2 times. So that's pretty unprecedented stuff right there. And obviously, I think they went for it at the 50 and didn't get it another time. They missed the kick. A lot of that game went really poorly for the Cowboys, and they still won. So that maybe is even like a feather in the cap of anyone out there who wants to make an argument that the Cowboys are a Super Bowl team, because that's what really good teams do. When things don't go right, you adjust and you win a game ugly, you win a game close, instead of maybe even when you should win a game by 14 to 17 points. But things don't go right all the time, and Dallas was able to adjust and still win that game.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm going to skip a final thought tonight because I can't hardly talk anyways. And for those of you that maybe this is your first podcast with us, I don't normally sound like this. So stay with us. It'll be better once I'm over this cold. But thank you guys all for joining us for episode 17 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you did, minus my voice, be sure and smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Drop us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow us at Twitter. I'm at _TPL.
I'm at Mark Henry Jr. _ I was trying to save your voice. My bad.
There you go. So for me, for Mark, for the Painted Lines, we'll see you guys next time.